We are pleased to present to you our research report titled Fixing It, Tackling Match Manipulation in Sport. The report is a collaborative endeavor of the Sports Law and Policy Center and the Vithi Center for Legal Policy. The report suggests a framework that would give public authorities the required tools to target criminal and illegal activities relating to sport and secure the viewers' faith in sport. It also proposes legislation to address the offense of match fixing. To take you through this report, I welcome the editors of the report, Abhinav Srivastava. Abhinav is a researcher at the Sports Law and Policy Center and counsel at Law NK. And Shashank Athreya, resident fellow at the Vithi Center for Legal Policy and former national ranked tennis player and certified foundation coach by the All India Tennis Association. If you do have any questions during the presentation or during any of our panels, do drop them in the Q&A box below, and our presenters and panelists will try to answer some of them. Over to Abhinav and Shashank, who will now take you through the report.
Shashank and I would like to kick off Symposium 2020 with the release of our report, Fixing It, Tackling Match Manipulation. A link to the report will be shared over Zoom's chat and will be emailed to all attendees after day one. The report explores the elements of an act of match manipulation. When is it a tactical call that's within the framework of the rules of the sport? And when is it outside these rules? What values of sport are violated by match manipulation? Who are the perpetrators and the victims of match manipulation? What factors contribute to participation in a fix? And regulatory gaps that exist in investigating and actioning incidents of match manipulation. Alongside the examination of the issue and presentation of our findings, the report also contains a proposed legislation which we would like to present to close these gaps and preserve integrity and ethics in sport. The report is a product of collaboration between Sports Law and Policy Center and the Vithi Center for Legal Policy. And we would like to thank the following contributors to the sport. From the Sports Law and Policy Center, we would like to thank Nihal Zakaria, Parvati Bhatt, Lokesh Kaza, and Ishwar Ramachandran. From the Vithi Center of Legal Policy, we would like to thank Arghya Sengupta. We would also like to thank Mr. Anish Dayal, counsel at the Supreme Court and Delhi High Court, for reviewing a draft of the report and assisting with finalization. The report was edited by us, Shashank Athreya from Vithi and Abhinav Srivastava, myself from SLPC. Now, with that introduction, let's look at how match manipulation is treated under Indian laws. Over to Shashank, on the report.
Thanks, Abhinav. Thanks for that introduction. To begin this process and understand the purpose of the report, Abhinav, could you let us know on why is it that acting against match fixing is important, and why is it that there is a need for us to do something to bridge the gap between law and policy on this subject?
Now, to answer your question on why is actioning match fixing important to us, we first have to look at the role of sport in society. Sport is a part of our culture. Sporting contests, an exhibition of skill and prowess with fans, participants, and other stakeholders in the sport, so sponsors to professionals and commercial partners, all investing their time, money, and effort, relying on these values of sport. Values such as the uncertainty of the outcome, competitiveness among the participants, fair play, and participating in the game with a motivation to win. Where a match result or an event within the match is fixed, it betrays all these values, which in turn betrays that element of trust in the sport. And that underlies both the fan following and the integrity of the sport, which has larger ramifications on the entire sports ecosystem. Simply put, what's there to excite and enthrall in sport if it's a choreographed performance?
That's interesting, but how is the question of match fixing currently dealt with under the Indian law? Are there existing legislations, provisions under the criminal law which deal with it, and if so, to what extent?
So match fixing by itself is not treated as a crime under Indian law. At most, it would be actionable as a contractual default, as it's a breach of your code of ethics, the athlete's code of ethics that they sign up with the federation. Indian penal law is strictly construed, due to which offences of cheating and even corruption require that they fulfill all of the ingredients of the necessity of a victim, the necessity of some loss being occasioned to the victim, and a proportional gain to the perpetrator of the crime. These are absent. This direct linkage is absent in an incident of match fixing. So, as past experience has shown, in the case of the 2001 match scandal and the 2013 spot fixing scandal, charges of cheating fell away.
So, if that is the position under Indian law, what are the regulatory gaps that we need to fill, and where is it that there is a need for intervention in terms of legal and policy matters?
As I said, match fixing currently is treated as a civil claim, with the sports federation engaged in actioning it as effectively just a breach of contract. So the sports federation's remit is limited to the players, officials, people who are close to the sport and who are governed by the sports federation. It doesn't apply, it doesn't action any conduct on the part of the external network that that supports match fixing and provides it with financial incentives. For example, bookies and the entire criminal syndicate that can rely on match fixing as a means of generating income and also facilitating match fixing through financial incentives. None of this is actionable by the sports federation. Now, with investigations itself, there is a material gap in the ability of the federation to investigate incidents of match fixing. A state's investigative power is much broader. It can tap phones, it can engage in surveillance, it can access records, financial records, phone records, and it can also interrogate potential witnesses or perpetrators. None of these powers are available to a sports federation, which means that sports federation's entire investigation is limited to coaches, officials, which is a very small set of the entire network that's engaged in match manipulation.
So, what's the final verdict, Abhinam? Should match fixing be a crime, or should we retain it as a mere offense which can be dealt on a civil front by the associations and the federations?
For this, we will look at the conception of a crime. A crime is an offense against society, against values that society holds dear. Now, the values of sports, as competitiveness and the trust that's placed in sport, creates victims across an entire cross section where there's a betrayal of trust to match fixing. So, in this way, there are sufficient grounds to render it a crime. To render it, keep it as a mere civil claim would mean that similar to what happened with the 2001 scandal and 2013 scandal, there would be no effective deterrent, there would be no effective action against the perpetrators. In a civil offense, you can only claim damages equivalent to the amount of damage that you have suffered. Unlike in the case of criminal sanction, in which a penalty can be applied that is linked to the illicit gain made. And there's also incarceration as an option. In a civil claim, your remedies are also limited to what is provided under contract. So you can ban the player from organized sport, but there's no effective deterrent that a crime would carry. And considering the nature of an offense of match fixing, rendering it as a crime also adds gravity to the conduct and the offense.
This really paved way for a reform and a potential legislation on this subject.
Sure. So that's exactly what we've done with the report. So with the background of the report, where we've highlighted the values of sport and who are the victims, we've explored the consequences of match fixing. We have proposed a bill, which I would like you to take us through. So of course,
Thanks,
now
Abhinam.
the tables are turned. It's my turn to grill you.
To begin with, for our participants and our audience, the purpose of this legislation, as Abhinav is pointed out through the course of his presentation, is to follow through the findings of the report and to put in law one of the key elements that can recognize the offense of match fixing and features that match fixing are associated with, and also put in place an institutional framework. And basis this, we can accord the distinction that match fixing as an offense require. And as the course of our presentation, we show you that why is a requirement of us providing this distinction to the offense of match fixing, and how have we done so, and what are the standards that we've prescribed under this legislation?
Great. So just to take a cue from the introduction, why would you say there's a need for a specific legislation to address the issue of match fixing? Can it be addressed through amendments to our criminal codes, either the IPC or the Maharashtra Control for Organized Crime?
Sure, that is definitely a possibility, and that's a possibility we've studied and analyzed. For instance, in Australia and some of the provinces or states in Australia have adopted this process by amending a state legislation, a state criminal legislation, and making match fixing a specific offense. But however, what we felt as part of this report and this initiative, that there is a need for us to specifically criminalize match fixing by providing standards. And this we've learned from the instance of Sreesanth being charged under the Maharashtra Organized Crime Act. So what happened in the Sreesanth's case that many of you might know is that the investigation authority found it difficult to match up to the standards of proof that is required under such a legislation. The Maharashtra Organized Crime Act is also applicable to matters such as drug trafficking and terrorism. Therefore, the standard of proof is much higher. Considering match fixing is distinct and the nature of match fixing varies from sport to sport, there is a requirement for us to analyze the offense in terms of a sporting perspective and provided that feature and that sort of distinction. So, and not only in terms of criminalization. I mean, if you go much beyond, there's also a need for us to build a culture around sports and preventing sports corruption, having an institutional framework where sporting federations, the sporting associations participate in a manner which can help its players and members understand the issues of match fixing and also know how to counter any attempts that have been made to influence a game adversely. So that is the larger purpose of this legislation. Of course, criminalization is one, and according that distinction of criminal aspect is one, but also setting up an institutional framework there is a need for a distinct law.
Just to explore one point that you made within the response, that match fixing comes in different grades across sport. So a match fix might be in the nature of throwing away the entire match, or it might be an element of the match, like bowling a no ball on the third ball of the second over. So are we treating all of them as the same offense with the same gravity, or is there some gradation that's proposed in the bill?
Absolutely. I mean, thanks, Abhinav. That's an observation that we've undertaken as a course of drafting this bill. Is match fixing in sports is a very there's difficulty in detecting an offense of match fixing, primarily because there are certain instances during the course of a match, maybe an additional a no ball or a let go of a certain number of runs, which often is is understood as a bona fide mistake and not really given the shape of a match fixing or a spot fixing. So, but what we've done under this bill is we've recognized that there are instances where match fixing becomes difficult to detect. So we've kept the possibilities very broad. We've made the distinction between match and spot fixing, the popular distinction, where match fixing as we've defined it to be an offense where from the beginning of the match, there is an intent to lose. And there is an intent to not participate in a manner which requires him as the highest standards of integrity in the game. Whereas spot fixing is we've defined as where in a situation in a match, probably a particular over or a particular set in an individual sport, or a particular time in a football game, wherein he's arranged or required to perform in a certain manner, like in the alleged Sreesanth case. So I think that is we've categorized under spot fixing. And to also understand the various possibilities of it. I mean, it could simply not be him not performing well. There could be different instances of match fixing. So what we've done is, apart from just looking at underperformance, we've looked at instances such as withdrawing from the team or strategizing in a manner which is with an intention to lose, or threatening or coercing. Maybe there are selectors or there are broadcasters or advertisers who threaten to cancel endorsement contracts or team contracts, association contracts based on a particular performance. So therefore, we've taken all of this into consideration and given an encompassing definition for the term match and spot fixing, so that in the future, if there is newness in terms of how match fixing is done, it gets covered under this legislation.
Okay, great. The next question I had is on the role that you envisage for the Sports Association or Federation. As one of the reasons why we're suggesting a bill is to create a culture that ensures that there's some adherence to ethics of sport, that it's implemented, it's adopted, and it's inculcated. So could you just explore that aspect of the bill? How are we supporting this culture and uh, the adoption of norms on integrity in sport?
So as you may know, and participants also might know, that if we can't leave it to the authorities or to the investigation authorities to deal with match fixing, it needs to be addressed from the genesis. So we should target players from their early interest, and when they start playing a sport at a serious level, we should start targeting players and sensitizing them, speaking to them about the ills of corruption, telling them that this is the potential issues that you might face as you make it into the senior teams, as you make it to the national teams. So we have to target them young, as they say it. So and that role the authority or the state in its broader term cannot play. We need the institutions and we need the associations to fill in that gap. But unfortunately, the state of affairs of our association and Federation India is quite poor. So we need to increase capacity, give them that impetus that you need to do, take up sensitization and advocacy measures. So what this bill does is it requires every association to set up a disciplinary committee to deal with issues of match fixing on its own. It also requires that every association should have a code of ethics, and the code of ethics should be broad. It should deal with vulnerability of minors. It should deal with how would they deal, what is the threshold in terms of punishment, and on what instances they categorize as match fixing, and what are the measures that they will take when in the event that a match fixing issue comes before them. So all of this boils down to the sports association being strong and the member network being aware of these issues. So for which we've developed an institutional framework, and overall to supervise and monitor all the associations without interfering into their day-to-day administration, we've set up an authority called the National Fair Play Authority. The National Fair Play Authority is primarily there to support the association and not interfere, but support them, give them the required resources, give them the required assistance, technical, sometimes maybe financial as well, to push them and create a culture of high integrity and respect primarily in sports.
And we also mentioned that, as we saw with the Srishant case, that he was charged under the Maharashtra Organized Crime Act. So there are instances where match fixing has been found to share a close nexus with illegal betting as well as and terror financing. So in the bill, how do you propose the National Investigative Authority will function? How will it integrate and interface with these other organizations?
Abhinav, as much as we want this to be a sport-specific legislation and a sport-specific law, it is not possible for us to run away from the reality. The reality is that we've seen in instances that match fixing is often, and a lot of times in cricket especially, connected to international terror financing, and it's connected to several other harsh crimes. So therefore, of course, when an issue of match fixing takes place, there are parallel investigation undertaken by other enforcement agencies, probably like the CBI or the ED. And there is a need for a free exchange of information between the agencies, that there should be no hindrance that each investigation agency, be it from the match fixing side and be it from the non-match fixing other crime related side. So what we've done is to accord this distinction, we have recommended that there be a specific investigation agency that deals with match fixing alone, and it is always can always seek assistance, seek information, and also provide assistance and information to other enforcement agencies. So while this will ensure that match fixing as an offense will get its own standards of investigation, but at the same time, if there are other provisions of law which have been violated pertaining to financing or terrorism or drug trafficking, all of that can also be pursued parallelly without an overlap and without compromising on true sporting principles.
Okay, great. So now we've dealt with the offense and how the bill treats the offense and the manner in which it supports investigation. The next question is, how does it protect the false positives? So as with any adversarial system, there is a risk that there may be some innocent actors who are caught within the net and are prosecuted. So in such cases, in the past, we've had players rush to either Supreme Court or the High Court to seek a reduction of their civil bans. So how does the bill assist players who are looking to challenge any action that's been taken against them, such as a player ban or a fine?
You're right, Abhinav. I mean, we've seen instances where players rushing to the Supreme Court or the High Court seeking for reduction in the ban, and the Supreme Court and the High Courts have also given them the opportunity to be heard and sometimes gone ahead and reduced the ban as well. While this is all right to a certain extent, we believe that the courts may not be an appropriate forum for a second hearing on their bans. Based on a study of various sectors, not only sports, we felt that there must be an appellate body or an appellate board which comprises of men and women of certain eminence, with having experience of playing in international and national levels, who can be part of the panel and decide not only truly on a judicial front but also from a perspective of the future of the alleged person who's alleged of the match fixing offense, and also from a perspective how does the integrity and the overall culture of the game gets affected. So, but if such matters are directly referred to the courts are not obliged or required to consider sporting impact on the sporting sector, on the sporting industry, and those aspects cannot be considered. So therefore, to have a broader perspective that is considered by a second body which on hearing appeals, we felt that an appellate board would be suitable to hear any appeals from the disciplinary committee on pertaining to their bans or pertaining to their sanctions and penalties.
So that's great. So from your presentation, the bill comes across as a self-contained bill, a self-contained legislation that is meant to operate as a specialized legislation directed to secure sports ethics, but it does have measures to ensure that it integrates and enmeshes well with the Indian legal framework. So can you take the SLPC, the symposium, through the working of the bill?
Thanks, Abhinav. I mean, over the course of the past 5-10 minutes, several features of the bill have come out, but I'm sure there must be a lack of clarity with respect to how does the bill actually play out in a real life or real situation. So take an instance. This is how the Prevention of Match Fixing and Promotion of Fair Play in Sports Bill, as we've chosen to call it, would ideally work. Player A, who's accused of fixing a particular match, the information of this match fixing is informed. The National Fair Play Authority receives this information of a potential match fixing. It can do so by two fronts. It can take an information from anybody, or it can suo moto, as we call it legally, or on its own, take the complaint and register it and refer the alleged match fixing offense to both the associations and the federation to take up the civil aspect of the offense, and refer it to the investigation agency to take up the criminal aspect of the offense. When the sports association then within 60 days is required to adjudicate and determine whether in terms of their code of ethics, does it qualify as match fixing? And if so, what is the ban or penalty that they recommend? On the parallel side, the investigation agency can continue investigating and coming up with this and hearing witnesses and summoning individuals who it believes is relevant. And based on its investigation, it can submit to the magistrate that so and so person or player A in this example is alleged to have committed the crime and push for prosecution with the magistrate. On a front, the disciplinary committee of the sports association can recommend bans, and these bans, like I earlier mentioned, can be challenged before an appellate board. And once it's challenged before the appellate board can determine if the ban can be upheld or it should be reduced. Of course, the right to go to the High Court and Supreme Court is reserved, and a player has that right. But we believe that in such a system, a need to rush to another court would not require, because this itself should take care of all needs of an athlete or a player. Before we conclude on the working of the bill and highlights of the bill, we'd also like to inform our participants that this is a bill in working, and we aspire and plan to work with various stakeholders, from parliamentarians to key stakeholders in the sporting fraternity, to push this bill to Parliament and take up advocacy measures that people see, and this bill sees that light of the day, and we will one day have a bill that can regulate match fixing and also criminalize it specifically.
Thank you,
We
Shashank. So
can take some questions.
I think we have enough time to take a few questions. I see the first question on the list is, if a match fixer is the captain and he tells the bowler to bowl a wide in the second over, will the bowler also be liable? So in these cases, since we're treating match fixing as a crime, there has to be an element of intent. There has to be that element that you've committed the act with the intent of committing the act for that particular purpose. So if the bowler is an unwitting participant, he will be outside of the core conspiracy that resulted in the execution of a match fix. Shashank, would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, taking your comments forward. What we've done under the bill specifically is that we've accounted for strategic decisions which may not be truly not be done with an intent to win. So under the bill, the key determination is the intent to lose rather than intent to win. So if we take certain decisions like asking the captain or making a decision to asking to bowl a wide, which would qualify as a bad strategic decision. But the person who is responsible, who's actually bowled, which is the bowler, we've given a certain exemption from him, but if he's as an unwitting participant, but because as a captain he's required to follow the advice of the captain, so as a bowler he's required to follow the advice of the captain. So we've given certain exemptions to the bowler under the law, which of course we hope you read the bill and see the specificities of it. Abhinav, there is one interesting question by Brett Osler. Would you like to take that?
Sure. So the question is, can you explain the governance structures of sport in India and the potential implications there? That outside cricket, all sports are state-owned and may have legal implications via contracts and government codes of conduct and industrial relations. I'm not sure.
So there's another question by the same person, where he speaks of court and pitch siding. That is, if in terms of how do you propose handle of activities of nationals undertaking these activities abroad?
Okay, so with court siding, effectively, it's become an issue because effectively it's allowing for benefits to be gained from the sport betting market due to an information asymmetry. That's the time that it takes for the information from the match to be transmitted and for odds either to be collected or to be determined in the betting market. You're engaging in arbitrage where you're profiting from that time by having priority access to information. So sports betting is treated as a crime and effectively as fraudulent conduct where betting is legal. Since that will require broad jurisprudential and legal discussion on legality and illegality of betting in India. We haven't dealt with that in the bill itself, as we don't want to divert from its object of actioning acts of match manipulation and acts that affect the ethics and integrity of sport. Shashank, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think that is on the same lines, Abhinav. Nothing further to add on that question. I think Mr. Satyanarayan Iyer Gopalan has asked a question on the constitutional basis of this legislation. He says, if the sports is coming under the state list, is it possible to have a uniform legislation? We had the opportunity to do some under reading and study on this subject, Mr. Satyanarayan. We felt that this legislation can fall under the residuary list, as we call it, or the list under the subject under list 1 or item under list 1, wherein if there are certain matters which are beyond the scope of all the 3 lists, it can fall under the residuary list. And something like uniform match fixing legislation, since it has an element of the concurrent list with respect to criminalization, it has subject of sports with respect to the state list, and also certain international obligations that India has to curb sports corruption, which falls under list 1. Considering it spreads across all the 3 lists, this qualifies and can be brought under the residuary list, which is under list 1, therefore allowing us for a uniform legislation.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have. As I said earlier, we'll be sharing the bill over, sharing the entire report with the bill annexed to it over Zoom chat and separately as part of an email blast at the end of day 1. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and we look forward to receiving your comments on the report as well as the legislation proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.